I don't know what to do about my work situation. I want to come out. I'm so sick of censoring my personal stories in the workplace. And I asked him, I said, do you think I should ask my board of directors, because I work for a nonprofit, if it's okay for me to live this lifestyle? Like, talk about internalized homophobia.
Hello, my bis and allies, and welcome to the very first episode of Bisexual Behavior, a podcast exploring everything queer and bi plus. My name is Talia Cass, and throughout the course of this podcast, I'll be interviewing different people who identify as bi, queer, and pan, and talk to them about their experiences in the community. I have a very great first episode for you. I got to talk to a friend of mine who is a badass working professional, but is also very openly queer. We talk about internalized homophobia, but not just that. We talk about things like the L word, we talk about coming out, we talk about our experiences in our relationships, and it's just a really great first episode. Cass Harrington is a manager of the visitor economy in central New York. We love upstate New York here in this podcast, by the way. Cass is an aspiring change maker with a firm notion that tourism is the key to economic vitality in central New York. And she's queer as hell. So we don't actually talk about tourism in this podcast episode, but she does have a really interesting background, and it's actually how we met. I used to work in tourism, so it's really inspiring to see her kind of go through her career and grow as a working professional, but also as a queer person. So just so you're aware, I recorded a lot of these initial episodes before June. I was originally planning on launching in June during Pride Month, but then Roe versus Wade happened, which is weighing heavily on a lot of us right now. I broke my pinky finger, I got COVID, so things have happened that have delayed coming out, but I'm so glad to finally get this episode out to you, and I really hope you enjoy it. So without further ado, here is Cass Harrington. Cass, thank you so much for joining today. I'm so excited to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I want to start out with some introductions. And I know that you and I have known each other from just working in the industry. And I've kind of gotten to know you a little bit through that. But then I saw you actually on a dating app, and then I was like, oh, she's also queer.
And the awkward moment where you're like, I don't know, should I swipe? Or...
just as to say, hey, I see you. But it's funny because dating apps have become a way for me to know who's queer, and that's like the best part of it. So I want to start with some introductions. You can definitely follow my format for it. So my name is Talia. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a chaotic bisexual.
And I am Cass, she, her. I'm a cisgender, pansexual woman in a lesbian poly relationship.
Oh, awesome.
Wow.
So today we actually are going to be talking about a very important topic. I know that hits home for probably all of us who are listening, and a lot of us can identify with internalized homophobia. Before we dive in, I do want to ask you, what is the queerest thing about you, Cass?
I've been thinking about this for quite some time now, but like, I don't know, queer, gay is subjective, right? So everybody has a different definition. And it's funny because like I'm learning things about myself, and it's other people that point them out. Like, for example, I had a gathering this past weekend, and my friends texted, there's a group thread, what are you guys wearing on Saturday for this shindig? And I was like, well, joggers, Nike sneakers, a V-neck t-shirt, and a denim jacket. and everybody else was like leggings and a long shirt or dress, whatever. And so just those moments where I'm like, oh, I'm not like them. And then like the other day in conversation with one of my partners, I mentioned how back in college, when I was in my dorm building, I suppose, and home, like my go-to was just to wear a wife beater, no bra, no nothing. And I'm like,
what a look.
I never really occurred to me. So I've got a Jeep Wrangler. I have one CD in my Jeep, and it is Alanis Morissette, Jagged Little Pill.
Nice.
It only takes one, so there is no other option.
Do you still listen to it?
Oh yeah, like if I'm too lazy to plug in my phone because I don't have Bluetooth, it's a um so I like literally just play Alanis all the time. So in the summer when I have my top down on the Jeep, I'm just cruising.
Atlantis all the
Um
way.
yeah, I'm like, oh, here I am.
And
This is
she's
me.
bisexual, right? Pretty sure she is.
Uh I think so. Yeah, I think like I'm actually not sure.
We'll
One
just
can
say she
hope.
is. Yes, one can hope. I always just assume somebody's queer before I find out if they're straight or not. That's the way to do it. So,
Yeah.
Cass, how long have you identified as queer and pansexual? When did you fully come to terms with it?
I think I officially came out oh geez, in March or April of last year.
Oh,
So I'm
wow.
about to approach my like 1 year. So that like this is all relatively new to me. The feelings have always been there, but it's just that I was never comfortable with acknowledging them or letting them be and act on them. So otherwise I feel like I've had tendencies, I suppose, since I was in middle school.
Gotcha. So, do you want to talk about that some more? So, what were some of those tendencies or things that made you think, maybe I'm not so straight?
Um, well, I went to a really small school, had a graduating class of like 42, and we were in a rural community. And so when I got to college, it was my first time away from my parents. It was my first time being able to act on my own like desires and do whatever I wanted to do. And instead of experimenting, I was just so freaking awkward. Like I couldn't make friends because as soon as I made a friend, I'm like, oh wait, does she think I'm hitting on her? Am I hitting on her? Can I hit on her? What the hell? So like,
Oh, I feel that.
college friendships were really difficult for me. And that was one of the big like, whoa, something's different here. Nobody else is really acting the way this is. Um, and I remember too when I was, geez, I don't know, probably in middle school, one of my best friends went away for summer camp and she came back with a story about this lesbian in her group at summer camp, and I was so fascinated. It was like the first time I'd ever really been exposed to or listened to stories and like how this girl just seemed so normal. And I'm like, so it's okay, this kind of thing is okay. And that's kind of what opened the door for me. And I think she wasn't long after she was back from summer camp when I think I told her. She was the first person that I ever told. I'm like, I think I like girls. And then it didn't come up again for quite some time.
Gotcha. Do you think that has to do with internalized homophobia?
Oh yeah. I was absolutely horrified to ever acknowledge it or come out or there were very few queer people in my school. Most people waited until college and then all of a sudden the floodgates opened.
Yep.
Um, I remember in college writing, one of our assignments was to write a letter to the editor. And we were handed a short list of controversial topics. And I chose to write about gay rights. And it was completely out of left field for me, most people thought. My father being extremely conservative, and it got published. It was the only one out of all of the class submissions that got published. And then somebody wrote in a rebuttal because one of the things that I had said in my letter to the editor was that it's time for change and the younger generation is going to bring it about. And perhaps it's time that the adults start considering that this is the new way of doing things. And so it kind of ruffled some feathers. And I remember that a few people had talked to my parents about it. They're like, oh, I saw your daughter's letter to the editor. And I remember feeling as though my parents were embarrassed. And so I kind of pushed that back away again, never to be thought of, at least for another couple of years. um, Yeah, that was kind of an experience in itself. And I didn't really, I guess then probably didn't realize where that voice was coming from. And it was probably the shortest but most persuasive piece that I'd ever written. And I felt great about it. And then I felt like I was doing that, like shaming my family.
Yeah, that's got to be so tough. And yes, we actually have a pretty similar background. I'm from a rural area as well. I had like maybe 70 people in my graduating class, and I didn't even consider my queerness until I want to say college, but then I forgot about it again. There's many times I forgot about it. But I think when you grow up in like the country type of area, when you're around like a lot of the same types of people, I think there's more shame over time. So could you talk a little bit more about what it was like growing up in a rural area as someone who was closeted, and what that was like for you?
I think I held back a lot. Friendships weren't necessarily difficult for me because we had the same friends growing up since kindergarten. Like I know almost everybody's birthdays in my graduating class. But I don't know. I don't really think about it because I guess when I look back, I don't really consider myself as having been queer then, which is weird. There's like there was a tipping point. Like all of a
Right.
sudden I just like acknowledged it.
And do you still live in a rural area now?
No, somewhat rural. I am in between Cooperstown and Oneonta, so
Gotcha.
it's not very. It is rural, but we have two colleges within 20 minutes of here, and so it's far different from home.
Yes, I can imagine. And so what I mentioned before is that, because we've met in the industry, we both work in tourism. I guess I'm just wondering, what is your experience with being openly queer now that you're out, in the workplace?
Yeah. Well, it took me some time to be comfortable with that. I actually came out to one of my colleagues at sitting right here in this chair, actually,
Oh,
and
wow.
told him that I am in a relationship with two women and I don't know what to do about my work situation. I want to come out. I'm so sick of censoring my personal stories in the workplace. And I asked him, I said, do you think I should ask my board of directors, because I work for a nonprofit,
Mhm.
if it's okay for me to live this lifestyle? Like, talk about internalized homophobia. And now I look back at it and I think, wow, like there was some significant influence there. And the more I sat with that and thought about the implications of it, I was thinking, if anybody is not okay with who I am, then I'm not okay with them really being in my life anyway.
Yeah.
So, much to my surprise, the workplace was extremely accepting.
Oh, that's
And I
great.
know that that's certainly not the case for everybody. There are some workplaces that that's just really not an option, and I really sympathize with those people. But mine was awesome. I got this. My ad agency sent me a coming out gift with this rainbow unicorn mug filled with chocolate in a Wonder Woman gift bag, and there were other things that just, it was so cute, and I'm like, this is for me? For what? For me?
That came from your ad agency? That is so nice.
Yeah, I know, but they're great. I absolutely adore them. So and then too, like my coming out was, you kind of do it in phases. You tell the people who are in your inner circle, and then you
Mhm.
tell more people, and then you tell more people, and then you get to the point where you're like, I don't remember who I've told and who I've not told, and I'm walking on thin ice here, and I'm just like, you know what, it's time, the world needs to know. So, one Facebook post later and it, like, the world knew.
Right, right.
But it just got to a point where I had to, and I feel so much better for it now.
That's great. That is
But
so
then, so
nice.
yeah, so when I made my coming out post, I put it all out there, like, yes, I am with two women, and it was pretty empowering just to see the feedback. And one of my colleagues from across the state who's also queer, came up to me at our next in-person meeting, and he was like, I am so proud of you. He goes, honey, you didn't just come out, you kicked that fucking door down.
Yes, yes.
Like, yeah, I mean, it felt great.
Yeah, I remember seeing that post that you did, and it even like shook me to my core in a way, because I was like, oh my gosh, like the fact that you're so willing to like just expose yourself out there, like even on Facebook where you have relatives and like people from high school, and it just felt like so fearless, and it was just inspiring to see. And I think the more people who come out like that, or at least talk about their queerness that openly, I think it makes more people speak out.
It's true. I hope to have helped, because I know that there were other people who did similar things that helped me as well.
Mhm.
For whatever reason, it's certainly understandable, but in my brain, it doesn't compute that poly is almost more less people can understand and accept a poly relationship than they can a queer relationship. And so that has been probably the most challenging part of it. And everybody wants to know, well, how does it work? But it works quite nicely.
That's great. How long have you been together for?
Let's see. My housemate and I have been together now for about 3.5 years.
Oh, wow.
And the other's 1.5, and she's actually completing her second bachelor's degree in Syracuse right now. So
Oh,
we're
that's great.
anxiously awaiting the next step in our lives.
Do you feel like maybe your internalized homophobia that you might still have as you've, come out and accepted yourself more has maybe affected your relationship in any way, or maybe even previous relationships?
I can certainly say that it was affecting my previous relationships when I didn't realize it.
Right.
And I've had to work through a lot of things, like anything in public was just holding hands was very, very, very challenging for me.
Right.
For a few months, I couldn't walk down Main Street in my hometown and hold hands with a girl without going, oh my gosh, they're going to talk about me. It's going to be on the front page of the newspaper or something. But now I'm like, I want to hold your hand and I want to tell everybody about it.
That's so good. And it's so nice that, once you've hit that point and you're so fully out that it just is transitions and you're able to just, I don't know, feel like you can be yourself without that layer of shame.
Yeah, living unapologetically me. And that's the best thing about this, is that like you asked me how I identify, and I had to think about it for a little bit, because really I've felt it's been easiest just to kind of let myself fall into what other people's what the definitions are for certain identities. And I'm like, yep, I check that box and I check that box. And so here I am, but like, I'm just me. I'm just doing what I like. And that has been liberating. I'm allowing myself to do what I like and what I want, and that's probably one of the best feelings. Like I'm just doing life.
Yeah. And I feel like for me, so the reason why I started this podcast is I had such a hard time accepting that, I'm bisexual, because I came out as bisexual. And then once I started dating women, I was like, I'm a lesbian now. This is great. I hate men. But, I started to realize over time, why did I feel like it would be a bad thing that I had relationships with men in the past and I enjoyed it then, or that I might see a guy and admire him, even if I don't necessarily want to have a romantic relationship with a man right now. But I think there's some power into, for me, at least, identifying as bisexual. And it's a big reason why I wanted to start this podcast, because I wanted to learn about how other people identify with those words and why they choose them and what that means to them. So it's interesting to hear your perspective on it too.
Yeah, I feel like I'm caught in that as well. Like, I feel like there's an expectation of me now to be a man hater. Like, I don't know. I just don't know if I can do that.
Right.
And that's entirely okay.
Exactly.
I'm happy with what I have, but we live for quite some time and people change.
People change. You can get frustrated with men as a whole, but still love and appreciate the men in your life. And I mean, It's just funny. So I'm a big, like, I love looking on TikTok, and there's so many videos of bisexual women or lesbian women who are just like shit talking men. And I just don't think it's helpful for people who are on the fence on whether or not they're bisexual or they're trying to understand their own sexuality, because you can still be queer and still, be with a man or like men. And I just think that it becomes harmful, and it's almost like it like triggers a different kind of internalized homophobia, which I think was a big thing for me.
Yeah, that's insightful. I can't say that I'm watching those TikTok channels, but I do. There is this very attractive Scottish man who does tongue twisters, and I just enjoy watching him so much. So he's one of the reasons why I'm like, I can't just commit to being a lesbian, because if I can meet this guy in real life, I don't know what I'd do with myself.
Right. That's okay. Yeah. Going back to internalized homophobia, what are other ways that you felt like it presented in yourself that you didn't really realize until later with you being fully out? Were there things that maybe you didn't really acknowledge were maybe internalized homophobia?
I definitely imagined that everybody would treat me differently. And, the truth of the matter is they do, but it's like, it's a better different, because there's honesty amongst us, and conversation just flows better, and I'm not awkward because I don't have to hold anything back anymore. And so I definitely realized that I had this huge stigma that my life was going to change once I came out. Another thing, it took me a very long time to tell my grandparents. Everybody else had known, and then it was a source of anxiety for me that one of my aunts might see it on Facebook and tell my grandmother. So I constantly had an ear to the ground, trying to anticipate what might happen. Like, my phone rings and it's my mother. Maybe mom's calling to tell me that my grandmother found out. I'm like, I cannot live like this. And so I told my grandparents, and surprisingly enough, grandma was like, whoa, well, as long as you're happy. And I'm like, you mean I just spent the last, I don't know, decade worried about this moment? My hands are sweaty, and you're happy.
That is such a nice surprise. And it's funny you mention your grandparents, because I still have not come out to my grandparents. So there's that. But so say if like somebody did react negatively to you being honest about who you are and what your sexuality is, what is something that you would say back to them, or what's a way that you would combat that negativity?
I would just tell them, this is who I am. Like, we don't have to agree on, who the sexy people are walking down the street for us to be acquaintances or friends, or have a respectful relationship, a working relationship, or whatever. They like what they like, and I like what I like, and we're, what I like doesn't necessarily affect them, so it shouldn't affect our relationship or how they react to me or my news. Just kind of like, okay, screw you. Like, I hope we can still be friends, but
it does make you see that person in a different light if they don't accept who you are, and makes you kind of,
And maybe there are people out there that feel that way, and I just haven't heard from them. Nobody has made it particularly known that they have an issue with it, but if we were acquaintances or friends, Facebook friends, and perhaps they blocked me, I don't know, maybe, but
well, fuck them.
Maybe I'm not also seeing their Trump posts now, so I'm entirely okay with that too.
Yeah, I saw like a very transphobic post on Facebook today, and then I did a dramatic reading of it in my office, and then unfriended them. So that's how I handled that.
Bye.
Bye. And the dramatic reading really adds to just showing how stupid they are.
Too sometimes. Yep, we have a very small office. There's only 3 of us, and I'm like, story time. Get in here.
It's so nice that your staff is so accepting. Do you think that, if you came out earlier in your life, that it would be much different?
I think about this often. I don't know. So like, I had my first choice college, I chose not to go to because it cost $2,000 more. hindsight, I wish I had gone. But one of my friends also told me too, if you go to that school, you're going to come out a lesbian. And I also
Is
think
this
that
New
there was
Paltz?
part of that was in the back of my mind when I made my decision to go to the other school.
Mhm.
And yeah, it could have happened. And in all honesty, I have, had relations with girls for a very long time. So in my mind, it just was what it was, but people didn't quite know about it. And the more people I told, the more people who were okay with it, the more
Mhm.
people I felt comfortable telling, and it just kind of dominoed from there. But I believe her. I think if I had gone to Ithaca College, I probably would have come out a lot sooner.
Oh, Ithaca, yes. I was gonna say it's either New Paltz or like Ithaca or what's the school that's in Massachusetts? I feel like I've seen something where it's like everyone there is basically a lesbian.
Yeah, I mean, I played softball, and so I was surrounded by lesbians. Again, that I was so freaking awkward, and I wanted to communicate with them, but instead it just ended up coming across as an interrogation because I wanted to know how are you living so honestly,
Right.
and and it never really resulted in me making a lot of friends or having any solid relationships because I was just battling so much in my head at the time.
Right.
But it gave me more time to focus on schoolwork if I wasn't always out social engagements.
Well, there you go. One thing I do want to ask, I think people who may be listening, they might be younger, are still unsure if they want to come out or if it's a safe place for them. What are ways that you can kind of combat your own internalized homophobia through maybe like community? Do you feel like having a queer community is something that's really helpful? Or do you think for you, the biggest thing was just being out and being proud as yourself that really made you kind of ignore those thoughts?
Oh yeah. For me, it was exposure.
Mhm.
In a small community, then my first real experiences were just seeing the culture in college, and then during the pandemic, I read Untamed, and it shook my world. And I can probably credit Abby and Glennon for my coming out because that book just fueled me with all the right feelings and justification for who I was and what my life could look like if I was living for myself.
Yeah.
I would tell people to give themselves a break.
Mhm.
I found that it was easier to just allow myself to fall into it than to it's not like once you come out you have to take on a specific tone or everything changes about you. It's just another day.
Yeah. It's just
um
you.
yeah. So like the last 2 years of my life have been a deep dive of just self-discovery, me trying to figure out what it is I like or what I have thought that I liked, but only because I thought that's what a straight woman who wouldn't want to do,
Mhm. What are some of those things that you discovered about yourself?
Well, I definitely have a more masculine wardrobe now. And
Same.
it's happening slowly. But I I was in New York City this past weekend and we went to Macy's and we entered on the men's floor and I was like, oh, I like that. I like that. I like that. And I went upstairs and I was like, I don't like anything here. But right in my defense, everything right now that it's in stores is like ruffles and like it makes me think of like Little House on the Prairie or Sarah Plain and Tall.
Oh, not my style.
No, no, I'm either in like all black or just being comfortable. Other things that I've discovered, it's like those stories where I say things and people are like, yeah, and you're straight. It's always fun though in my house, like it's we if we get like a frozen pizza, so we have to cut it ourselves, and it like there are big slices and smaller slices. So we're like, well, you can't expect us to cut a pizza straight. Or like when I'm notorious for when I swear I'm straight in a parking space, I get out and definitely not. But I don't know if like my balance is off or something. When I get out, I'm like, what the hell? Every time. Not that
That's me as
has
well.
anything to do with my sexuality, but it's just funny. It makes me smirk.
It is like, I don't want to say that those queer bisexual stereotypes are true, but I absolutely love a lot of them. Like, I don't know how to sit in a chair. I'm like, like I'm not good at math. I suck at parking, like all those like different stereotypes. I'm like, yeah, that's me. I don't know if that's actually just because I'm queer or just because I really just decided to take ownership of them. And either way, it's totally cool. But
yeah. And I was such a late adapter, whatever. I was so late to the game with the L Word. I just started watching it during the pandemic and I breezed through it.
Oh my
I have
God.
withdrawals.
But you got to rewatch it.
It was validating. Every single episode, I was like, oh my gosh. And so these women just date each other and they live their lives and they just like Bet is just a boss ass bitch and she continues to run museums and things like that. And I'm like, that could be me.
Hell yeah. It is already you. Come on. Have you seen Gen Q?
I have not.
Oh, so it's the new version of the L Word and Bet is on it. There's a couple, they brought back a couple characters and Alice is back on it and she has her own talk show. It's good. I would say that like the L Word in general isn't amazing. There's parts that are kind of trash, but it's like our trash, I take full ownership of it. I love it. And it's funny that you mentioned like you saw yourself watching the L Word and felt like, oh yeah, that's me. I love this. But I first watched it when I was in college. And I think I was obsessed with it and I watched it through twice, totally straight. But I think what part of watching it did set me back in my journey a little bit because the beginning they were a little bit biphobic, especially to Alice. And it made me feel, especially with Jenny's whole storyline, I felt like, ooh, I don't know if I would be gay enough or like because I haven't dated a woman that I wouldn't even fit into that circle and I would just be made fun of and that nobody wouldn't date me because I dated men for so long. So now as I'm watching it, as I'm older, because I've obviously rewatched it again because sometimes you just really need some like lesbian television. But I don't feel that way as I watch it. All of it. I just like, give me all the gay shit. If somebody tells me about a new show, I'm like, is it gay? And they're like, no. And I'm like, I don't know. Thanks.
I'm not really interested. Have you seen Sense8?
I have not seen that, but I've heard that I should.
Oh my gosh, it is revolutionary. Like the storyline is a little crazy at first. You got to give it that like minimum 4 episodes in order to get hooked is my cardinal rule for any new TV series.
Yeah.
But talk about a cast full of beautiful people, and there are 2 sex scenes that I promise you'll go back and watch again whether or not you're watching the series or the episode.
Is there a strap scene? I heard there's some strap representation.
Yeah, actually I think it's in the first episode.
Nice. All right. Yeah. I've just got to watch it.
It was amazing. We just finished it a couple of weeks ago and we still talk about it like. And I think it got canceled after the 3rd season. There were supposed to be more, which is so unfortunate. But I had never heard of it until I saw it on a Lesbian Actually subreddit thread when people were like, hey, what's some queer TV to watch? And I said, okay, yeah, I'm going to investigate all of these.
Oh, but let's talk about Reddit for a second, because Reddit was such a big part of my coming out journey and like accepting myself for who I was. And like, I mean, I had some people to talk to. One of my best friends is bi. She's married to a man, but I felt like I wanted to build my own queer community, even if it's people I didn't know, but just to read what other people are feeling was so helpful for me. So are you a big Redditor in general?
I actually, Friday is my cake day. I have only been on it for 3 years.
Okay.
My partner introduced it to me, introduced me to it, but uh, I'm a lurker. I don't post and I actually don't read very many comments. So I don't consider myself at least a good Redditor, but there are times like I built out a really good lesbian playlist on Spotify after just stalking a thread and going through and listening to this band or that band and that song. And lo and behold, there's other people who've done the same thing. So
Yeah.
why did I spend 2 hours of my life creating a playlist that somebody else has already made?
You'll have to share that for me. Always looking for new music, especially if it's queer. So
yeah. Well, one of my new favorite YouTube, like type in the search field, lesbian sexy music. It's amazing.
That's a hot tip. I'm gonna check that later.
Like, is this shared account with any of my immediate family, like my parents, my sister? Are they gonna see my search history? I don't know. Okay.
My search history is hilarious, and it's always like searching if like celebrities are queer.
Yeah. One of my most surprising queer discoveries was Sarah Paulson.
Oh my God.
I had no idea, and I thought I had like this. I thought I had a like I was the only person in the world who was crushing on her. Like she's not on the front of any magazines in the grocery store by the cash register, but there's something about her lips and the way she talks and everything about her.
Yes, like, you're not alone in that.
This woman. And then I found out the other day, well, a couple weeks ago, that she's going to be playing Glennon Doyle in the Untamed television show.
I didn't even know that they were making a television show out of it.
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that. But I was like, wait a minute, you mean I'm not the only person? I'm kind of sad, but also feeling pretty justified because I guess when they asked Glennon who they wanted to pursue as an actress to portray her, and she was like, Sarah Paulson. And okay, who's the backup? Sarah Paulson.
It has to be Sarah Paulson.
No, really, where's the backup? Sarah Paulson. And they like, she wrote this heartfelt email to Sarah, and Sarah was just like, oh my gosh, like, is this really happening? Yes. And I'm like, oh my God, this is one of the best days of my life. You're driving home, learning of this. I don't know when it's going to launch or what. I don't know anything about the timeline, but I can't wait.
I haven't heard anything about that, so I'm going to look it up. But I feel like Sarah Paulson is someone who she's just for the ladies. Like you don't hear about men thirsting about her because she specifically is for us. But did you know?
I like that.
Yeah. Did you know that she's actually she's been with Holland Taylor for years?
Yeah.
I think about that almost every day. Because you always hear about big age differences with the man being older with a woman, but like two ladies together with that age gap, I'm like, oh my God. I don't know why, it's the most fascinating thing to me.
I also take pride in being the oldest of my threesome. So
there you go. What's the age difference, if you don't mind me asking?
Not a big age difference at all. like 3 years. But I'm just
okay,
that's I'm the man of the house.
All right, well, Cass, we are going to transition into our last segment here, which is I'm just going to ask you some questions. Eventually, I would love this to be kind of like the listener questions, but for now, it's more just commonly asked questions of somebody who may be listening. So the first one being, what would you tell someone who's having a hard time accepting their own sexual identity?
Just to be yourself. Listen to what's going on in your head. Like, meditation actually helped out quite a bit with some of these things. I think there was a significant revelation that occurred when I was on a yoga retreat in Greece, actually, and we did all sorts of like breathwork journeys and group meditations, which is pretty powerful if you've not been a part of that before. But it's time to giving myself time to think about it and not bury it in everyday things. Like I was happy working 50, 60 hours a week because I think I was kind of avoiding being myself. I didn't want to really be who I was out in public. So I just kind of tried to keep myself as occupied as possible. So there was a period of self-reflection that was extremely necessary. And through that, that when you let your guard down and you start living for yourself, that's when the magic happens.
That's some great advice. And meditation is something I've always struggled with. Do you have any tips on how to kind of get into that if you're newer to meditating?
I definitely guided meditations to start. Like it's next to impossible to jump into it by just telling myself I'm going to sit here and not think about anything for a while.
Yeah, my head's nuts. I can't.
Yeah, absolutely. Mine too. But so there's all sorts of, there's apps, but there's also YouTube channels and varying resources for people who want to dip their toes into it. And there's all sorts of things. Like there's sleep meditation and all the things. You can find whatever it is that you're looking for, I promise.
Gotcha. I guess it must be, I think I just put a lot of pressure on myself to just lay down and be able to turn off my brain. And I think a lot of people get caught up in that, but it's nice knowing that there's resources that make it a little bit easier.
Yeah, I find that there's some actually that are intended to send you certain messages, almost like hypnosis through the meditation if it's guided, but also put you to sleep at the same time. So while you're falling asleep and you're losing consciousness, your brain is still absorbing the information that it's telling you. And so if you choose wisely, like there's all sorts of like there's weight loss and habit breaking and all sorts of things. So
oh, cool. I didn't know that was a thing. That's awesome. All right, next question. What would you say to someone who's not sure if they should come out or not? Kind of similar to the last question, but
yeah, I would just say try to expose yourself to the queer community in any way possible. And if it makes you feel just happy, like you've found your people, then you might want to consider it. And it doesn't have to be right now. It doesn't have to be before you're ready. In all honesty, like if I had put a date or a deadline on it, like, okay, well, if I'm not out by the time I'm 30, I'm going to have to tell everybody anyway. It really just it was a tipping point for me. It just felt natural. Like, okay, I'm done hiding. I'm just going to live my life. And so I haven't really had this conversation with a lot of people, so I don't know if that's normal. Does everybody have that same experience where when you know, or is it different for other folks? Like,
I feel like for me, at least, it was very gradual. And it was like this thought in the back of my head that kept getting louder and louder until it hit a tipping point, like you're mentioning. So I would say that's probably pretty common then. I would also suggest if you do feel like you might be queer, just join roller derby.
Yes.
Then you'll know for sure.
There's actually in Oneonta, there's a bar that roller derby sponsors. What the hell are the shows called where they dance?
Oh God.
Burlesque,
yes.
Yeah, burlesque shows. I'm like, what the heck? So yeah, a bar full of roller derby chicks who are hosting burlesque shows. Like, that is an opportunity to immerse yourself in the culture, even in a small town like this. Yeah, definitely
roller derby, of course, but also making sure that it's safe for someone to come out. Like for you and I, it seemed like it was pretty fine to come out, and luckily we both were in accepting situations, but that's not the case for everyone. So if you don't feel like it's safe, then, listen to your gut. But yeah.
And I would definitely say to at least have one or two conversations with people who can be in your corner before it happens. You don't have to tell everybody at once. That gradual thing is part of the safety net that you establish when you're telling your closest friends, because they're going to be okay with it. And then you tell, the next wave of people. That is definitely for security reasons, for part of it, and comfort. But safety is definitely a concern. I know that there are certain, like one of my partners doesn't have the most liberal work environment, and so it was very challenging for her, but thankfully she also works for a large corporation, so there's a massive HR office who's keeping watch over her.
That's good. Yeah, it can be tricky if you don't have backing like an HR person, and sometimes HR isn't super helpful, but yeah, sometimes.
I am the HR rep for my small office of 3.
But yeah, thank you so much, Cass. You have so much great advice. It was really nice to learn more about your journey and how you've combated internalized homophobia and really became yourself. And I hope it inspires other people to do the same. I know it's inspired me. And I would love to have you come back, and even you can bring your girlfriends. I'd love to learn more about their experience, more about your relationship. There's so much to talk about. So
yeah, there is. And I love to talk about it too now. Whenever you want.
All right, cool. Well, then let's have you back and have them join. I'd love to meet them virtually, or we can always get a drink sometime. But yeah.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for having me. This has been fun.
This has been so much fun. Thank you so much. What a great discussion. I'm so happy again that Cass is here, and thank you again to her, but also thank you all for listening to the very first episode. I have some great interviews planned ahead and some already recorded, and I just can't wait to share them with you. I do plan on having Cass to come back to talk about her relationship. I think that would be really cool to learn more about. For now, you can give Cass a follow on Instagram. It's at CA55ANDRAGRAM. And you can give us a follow at Bisexual Behavior. And if you have any questions for me, any feedback, feel free to give us a DM on Instagram, or you can email me directly at bisexualbehaviorpod@gmail.com. You can support the pod by subscribing on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. Feel free to rate us and even give a comment. All of that feedback really matters. I am very sensitive, so keep that in mind. If you have feedback, just a little sugarcoating always helps. No, I'm kidding. But I really do love to hear what you think. I'm always trying to improve the podcast. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Okay, bye.